right now to say.
And they are off. Soldier Ride. It is our pleasure to host them 16th year in a row right here on Fox.
And help out Wounded Warrior Project .org.
Almost got it in. Right. All right, here we go. President Trump stepping up the war of words with the so-called squad as he frames his argument against the 2020 Democratic candidates. We say good morning. It's a Thursday, rainy day here in New York City. I'm Bill Hemmer. Welcome here, and a big welcome back to you,
It is
Heather.
great to be back. Nice to be here. I'm Heather Childers in for Sandra Smith today. You know, it was a raucous campaign event last night in North Carolina, my home state. President Trump railing against one Democrat's impeachment effort, which went down to defeat just before the rally.
Meanwhile, he's not letting up on the far-left Democrats in the House as he put a big emphasis on the state of the economy.
We have the strongest economy in history, the lowest unemployment numbers ever. In a very short period of time, if the Democrats would give us a few votes, we could solve the immigration problem, and it would be so great. It'd be so great. Their party is afflicted with an ideological sickness that protects foreign borders, but refuses to protect our own borders. Democrats have never been further outside of the mainstream. They're going crazy, folks. Bernie's desperate now. I watch him up there. It's a sad situation. But I think they're all sad when you get right down to it. Republicans know that America is the greatest force for peace and justice in the history of our world. But these left-wing ideologues see our nation as a force of evil. They never have anything good to say. That's why I say, hey, if they don't like it, let them leave. Omar has a history of launching vicious anti-Semitic screeds.
1 hour, 31 minutes, Greenville, North Carolina. Team Fox coverage kicking off our day today. Peter Doocy has reaction from the 2020 Democrats. But first, Kevin Corke is live from the White House, and we begin there. Hey, Kevin, good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Not only did the president not let up on the comments previously made by the so-called squad, the 4 Democratic congresswomen, he actually drilled down on some of their prior comments and support for ideologies that the president decided were anti-American. All that and much more in his comments last night, as Heather described it, a raucous rally in the Tar Heel state. The president said left to their own devices, the squad, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Ayanna Pressley, would fundamentally change America in a way that he says would hurt the country. In fact, he also read some of their comments aloud, accusing the 4 at times of anti-Semitism and being pro-open borders. Proof, he said, of the dangerous path of the Democratic Party.
So these congresswomen, their comments are helping to fuel the rise of a dangerous, militant hard left. But that's okay, because we're going to win this election like nobody's ever seen before.
Plenty of applause lines if you watched last night. Meanwhile, the president also mentioned that the House of Representatives voted to set aside a resolution to introduce articles of impeachment against him, noting that even many Democrats think that's a bad idea.
332 to 95. Think of it. We have the strongest economy in history, the lowest unemployment numbers ever. We've rebuilt the most powerful military, and they want to try and impeach. It's a disgrace. It's a disgrace. So now we have that behind us.
Now we have that behind us, at least for now, so says the president. By the way, Special Olympians, Bill, will pay a very special visit here to the White House. We are certainly looking forward to that, as well as a visit by the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. That and much more throughout the day here, including perhaps a bit of breaking news later in the afternoon. One can never be sure, but I'll be here for you all the same.
All
for now,
right,
back to you.
I think we call that a tease in the business. Thank you, Kevin Corke. Sir, nice to see you from the North Lawn.
You too.
Well, President Trump also taking aim at his 2020 challengers, calling out a few of those candidates by name at last night's rally.
Sleepy Joe's not looking too good. They have a new one who knocked the hell out of Biden during a debate. He said, I wasn't prepared for that question. That's not a good answer. Buttigieg. He's a beauty. He runs a failed city. His city is doing so badly. Hey, Bernie, let me save you a lot of time and effort, Bernie. You missed your time. It got taken from you 4 years ago.
Well, several women running for president slamming his attacks on their female colleagues, though. Peter Doocy is live for us in Washington. Peter, how did the 2020 Democrats defend their colleagues in the House?
With strong language of their own, Heather. Kamala Harris tweeted just a few minutes after the rally wrapped, "It's vile, it's cowardly, it's xenophobic, it's racist, it defiles the office of the president, and I won't share it here. It's time to get Trump out of office and unite the country." Harris seemed to earn as close to a compliment as anybody from the commander-in-chief for being the newcomer that caught Joe Biden off guard at the last debate, as Elizabeth Warren heard a familiar attack about her ancestry.
I was driving her crazy. So she went out and hired a guy to check the blood. I'm sure he had a lot of fun doing that. He checked her blood and found out that many years ago, there could have been somebody, and he could have been Indian.
A few minutes after that, Warren tweeted this: "This president is desperate, calling out his racism, xenophobia, and misogyny is imperative, but he's trying to divide us and distract from his own crimes and from his deeply unpopular agenda of letting the wealthy and well-connected rip off the country. We must do more." None of the 4 House Democrats Trump targeted last night have endorsed a candidate for president last night, but it sounds like the so-called squad's fight with Trump is about to become part of at least a half a dozen stump speeches. Heather.
Well, perhaps one of those endorsements will come after the upcoming Democratic debates. What do we know about them?
That Governor Steve Bullock is going to slide onto the debate stage, taking the spot that Eric Swalwell held last time. Seth Moulton, who did not qualify for the first debate, also didn't qualify for the second debate. And the billionaire Tom Steyer, who was pledging to spend tens of millions of his own dollars on a campaign, couldn't buy a spot on stage at the end of the month. And that's even though there are still enough candidates to have 2 nights worth of debates. And the host network CNN is going to assign spots on the stages with a live draw. Heather.
Exciting. Thank you so much, Peter.
Like the NBA draft.
Yeah.
Peter, thank you. For more on this, Josh Hall, former Chief of Staff to Senator Mitch McConnell. Josh, how you doing? Good morning to you.
Morning, Bill.
A lot to get to. Let's start with last night. What struck you about this?
One of the more remarkable things about this president is his capability of entirely shifting the political dynamic underneath our feet and framing questions in a way that have huge advantages for him across the country. And I'll tell you what I mean. About once a quarter, he completely disrupts the conversation that we're having, throws the political and media establishment into absolute chaos. And when the dust settles, what happens is you get a political question where his political opponents basically have to defend the indefensible. You remember things like the NFL was a perfect example with the kneeling during the national anthem. At the end of that, he is decidedly in a 70% place with the American people. Well, in this case, what we have now on Thursday, which started last Sunday, is a question that puts him vis-a-vis the squad and unbelievable policies that are so far out of the mainstream of the American political electorate that it is incredibly advantageous to him. And now he's got every single 2020 opponent basically defending it.
Well, here is, to your point then, here is a clip from last night about the Democratic infighting.
By the way, I keep hearing how much enthusiasm is in the radical left. I don't think they have enthusiasm. They're just fighting with each other. We have all of the enthusiasm. He goes home now to mommy, and he gets reprimanded, and that's the end. Sorry, mommy.
Entertaining nonetheless there with that protesters being kicked out there. What do you think? You're right about trying to marry the Democratic Party with the squad and the policies they're pursuing. What do you think about the labels of racism we've heard about in the last 12 hours?
Well, I think it's an example of the distraction that, frankly, every single 2020er and the media establishment take the bait on every time he raises these issues. Everybody races out in condemnation of President Trump. And what happens ultimately is his political opponents, while nobody is watching, end up defending things like, let me give you an example. Ilhan Omar, one of the members of the squad, just yesterday, after every 2020er has now embraced the squad, introduced a resolution in the House of Representatives to support the BDS movement. What the BDS movement is a boycott against Israel. It is probably the most anti-Semitic thing that you will ever see in Congress, and yet now he has got Democrats basically in support of her position, which is completely mind-blowing. That is something that no Republican could ever even hope for, but somehow President Trump emerges with this as his reality.
That just happened yesterday, too. There's more from this, too. Check out Karl Rove's piece today. The title is AOC is the gift that keeps on giving. All right, here's the quote. Representative Ocasio-Cortez is not a serious legislator, but an unusually shallow poseur. The product of social media culture, she offers slogans cribbed from the latest socialist bull session, wild utterances that receive enthusiastic nods from woke Democrats, and looks of astonishment from much of middle America. Looks of astonishment from much of middle America. That's where the president's going with a lot of this.
Absolutely. And everybody wants to focus on President Trump and whether he's telling the truth and the 8 million fact checkers. I mean, AOC makes President Trump look like Abe Lincoln. I mean, practically nothing that comes out of her mouth has any basis in fact or truth. I thought Karl's op-ed was absolutely right in that regard, but literally just stay tuned. I mean, within an hour, we're going to get something else on Twitter that is totally ridiculous. And the president seizing upon that is nothing but to his advantage.
I got to think his campaign's watching and waiting for every appearance they make, too, like they did last Saturday night. Josh, thank you so much. Josh
Thanks,
Holmes
Bill.
there in Washington. We will get the next rally, 1st of August, about, what, 12 days from now? Cincinnati, Ohio, southwestern corner.
And we'll have a big crowd watching, no doubt, for sure. Yeah. Well, coming up, President Trump, of course, last night, bashing the Russia investigation before a big crowd in North Carolina. The president blaming Robert Mueller's witch hunt for slowing down his agenda. Senator Thom Tillis was at the rally, and he joins us up next, plus this.
These demonstrations turning violent in Puerto Rico, sparking clashes with police and protesters. Why so many Puerto Ricans are calling for the governor to get out of office. Coming up.
And less than an hour from now, the border crisis takes center stage on Capitol Hill at a hearing on the child separation policy. We are live on the ground at one port of entry ahead.
Democrats have put the needs of foreign citizens far ahead of our own citizens. Nowhere in this world is there anything like what's happening with immigration, how bad it is.
Violent protest rocking Puerto Rico as thousands fill the streets of San Juan demanding the governor resign. Tensions boiling over when crowds burst through a barricade. This was at the governor's mansion. The police responding with tear gas and rubber bullets. 2 people were injured, 5 others arrested. Protesters want Governor Ricardo Rossello to step down after a leak of some online chats. The messages appear to show Rossello and his advisors mocking women and victims of Hurricane Maria.
Could you imagine what it could have been if we didn't have the witch hunt? You said it. I won't say it because it's a terrible word. So I will not say that this guy said if we didn't have the bull. That's right.
That came early in the night, the president ripping the Russia matter, telling that big crowd in North Carolina he could have gotten a lot more done if not for that probe. My next guest was there last night, North Carolina Republican Senator Thom Tillis, a member of the Judiciary Committee. Senator, how you doing, and good morning to you. Give us a sense of the room last night in Greenville, North Carolina first.
Well, there was a lot of energy. In fact, I rode with the president in the motorcade from the airport, and the streets were lined with supporters. And in the venue, there was a lot of great support for President Trump, and I think the president did a good job of trying to cut through some of the media obfuscations and make a case to the American people.
What do you think about the point he was just making there, making the case that if not for the Russia matter, we'd be a lot further along now? Where would we be?
I think he's right. I think that my colleagues in the House are really trying to beat a dead horse. The special counsel concluded there was no collusion and no obstruction, and yet if you look at their committee calendars and what they're doing over there, it has nothing to do with productive results for the American people. It has nothing to do with job creation. It has nothing to do with lowering the cost of health care. It has everything to do with their fixation on what I do believe the president appropriately calls a witch hunt. They searched for a witch, they didn't find it, move on.
All right. In addition to that, apparently the Michael Cohen case has been closed. We're going to see some documents out of the Southern District here in New York in about 2 hours from now. But it was clear that he was going to single out these 4 Democrats in the House that he's been going back and forth with for a while, but really heated up in the last few days. Here is Ilhan Omar and the president going there last night.
Representative Omar blamed the United States for the terrorist attacks on our country. Omar minimized the September 11th attacks on our homeland, saying some people did something. I don't think so. Some people did something.
It was around that same moment she looks down with contempt on the hardworking Americans, saying that ignorance is pervasive in many parts of this country. And that goes back to the whole deplorable comment. The media seems to be rather focused on the chants in the crowd last night when they said, send her back. You heard that, I'm assuming, and what did you think when that happened?
Well, look, anytime you get into a crowd like that, you've got a lot of supporters. They're going to say what they want to say. But I think we have to go back to something. It was on your prior segment that Omar has just proposed yesterday, and that is support for sanctions against Israel. And even worse, as she's describing why people should support it, she said it's analogous to the sanctions against Nazi Germany. I can't think of anything more audacious than that statement about the Jewish community in the United States and our great friends and allies in Israel. We've got to shift the attention back to some of the positions that they're taking that are extreme. Now, the media here in Capitol Hill only want to talk about parsing the president's words. I'm not going to answer a question of them unless they come back and talk about the things that actually lit this candle. And it's the extreme positions taken by AOC, Omar, and the so-called gang.
If that's the case, and the people in that arena are being characterized as racist, you're going to face questions about this. To them, what do you say, Senator?
Well, I refuse to take that bait. This is about people who want to change America. This is about people who have a socialist vision for the United States. What I'm going to talk about is record low unemployment, particularly among minorities and women. I'm going to talk about regulatory burdens being taken off of business. I'm going to talk about a stronger position with China, NATO paying their fair share, and the litany of things that we've accomplished in the time that the president's been in power and Republicans have a majority, and previously in the House and now in the Senate. There are a lot of results out there, and sooner or later, I think this back and forth, people are going to get tired of. They want to talk about results, and I think when they understand what we've done, they're going to elect us back in majorities, and they're going to reelect the president.
Well, that's why we have elections. Sir, thank you for your time. I hope you come back. Tom Tillis, the Republican from North Carolina. Thank you for your time. 20 past. Heather.
And we have a Fox News alert on a new report that Iran has seized a foreign oil tanker in the Persian Gulf. More on what the crew is accused of. Plus.
Also, he pushed to get it passed in the House. Now the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund is stalled in the U.S. Senate. Jon Stewart slamming 2 individuals in particular. New reaction in a moment as to why.
There's some things that they have no trouble putting on the credit card. But somehow when it comes to the 9/11 first responder community, the cops, the firefighters, the construction workers, the volunteers, the survivors, all of a sudden, man, we got to go through this.
This program is brought to you by Gillette, the best a man can get.
Leave for blocking passage of the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund by unanimous consent. That bill would allocate about $10 billion for first responders, medical expenses, and economic losses. But the Kentucky senator says the spending should be cut elsewhere to pay for it before you take on new debt. Here is Jon Stewart with Brett on Special Report.
Pardon me if I'm not impressed in any way by Rand Paul's fiscal responsibility virtue signaling. And now he stands up at the last minute after 15 years of blood, sweat, and tears from the 9/11 community to say that it's all over now. Now we're going to balance the budget on the backs of the 9/11 first responder community.
We will see what happens in the Senate. The House overwhelmingly passed the bill about a week ago. Senator Paul says he is not blocking the bill, simply asking for a vote on an amendment to offset the cost of it.
And now to another Fox News alert. Iranian forces reportedly seized a foreign oil tanker, accusing its crew of smuggling oil. Iran State TV reports that there were 12 people on board. And of course, this comes just days after an oil tanker from the United Arab Emirates disappeared near Iran. Michael Anton, former national security spokesman for President Trump, joins us from Washington with more. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So
Great to be here.
let's start with what President Trump had to say about Iran last night. Listen.
I withdrew the United States from the horrible, one-sided, disgusting Iran nuclear deal, and Iran is a different country today.
Different country today. Do you agree?
Well, certainly we know that their revenues have plummeted because the United States, first of all, got out of the deal. The deal enabled Iran to do business with the rest of the world, something the regime has wanted for a long time. And the U.S. administration has also tightened the sanctions, which has caused Iran's revenue to plummet because they have a much more difficult time selling oil, which is the main source of revenue for the regime. So they're very cash-strapped right now, and I think that is a partial explanation for why you're seeing some of this reckless behavior. Iran is casting about, looking for ways to get out of this box that they've been put in.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, how do you think that we should respond, this being just the latest provocation?
Well, I think we should do what the president has been doing, which is to be careful and pay attention, keep the pressure on, make clear that there are lines that Iran can't cross, but otherwise try to keep tensions as low as possible. I don't think the United States or the world needs or should want a war with Iran or conflict in the Gulf that could spin out of control. But the overall goal of constraining the regime's revenues and means of spreading terror and spreading chaos is a good goal, and I think it's been effective so far.
You know, the president played golf the other day. Rand Paul, one of the people he was playing golf with, and apparently what came out of that, he's going to become the president's emissary to Iran. What do you think about that? Because he hasn't really always agreed with this administration.
Well, he doesn't always agree with the administration, but I think he's aligned with the president on the fundamental goal, which is to keep the Iranian regime from getting a nuclear weapon, but also to keep tensions with Iran from getting out of control and ending in conflict. The problem that I think we're going to have is that the Iranians so far have shown no appetite to talk to anyone from the United States. They've held out a pretty stiff arm, saying that, you know, unless we make a whole bunch of concessions and ease sanctions, they don't want to have anything to do with us. They'd rather talk to the Europeans and to others. So it's, you know, it's one thing to be named an emissary, but the other side has to be willing to sit down. And so far, they've not shown a willingness.
No, but I wanted to ask you about that in terms of sanctions. Since you mentioned it, Rand Paul has argued that sanctions are a, quote, act of war.
Well, look, sanctions are, I think I would have to disagree with that. Sanctions are something that countries do precisely in order to avoid war, to put pressure on another regime, to express their own displeasure, to try to deny a hostile country revenues and the means to spread chaos. It's something that you do when you don't want to go to war, but when you can't sit back and do nothing. And in that sense, it's a kind of moderate middle ground policy.
So you don't think that that would be something that Rand Paul would cave on?
Well, look, he's not ultimately the decision maker. He may come back to the president and recommend the lifting of sanctions, but that's the president's call. And from what I saw when I was in the administration and from what I've seen since I've been out, the president, again, doesn't want war with Iran, but he also wants to keep the pressure on Iran, keep denying the regime the revenues that it uses to spend on terrorist activities and other things. So
nobody
I think
wants war for sure.
I think the senator may make that argument, but my sense is the president's probably not going to go for it.
Yeah. Well, Michael, I apologize for talking over you there, but we have to go. Thank you so much for your insight.
All good. Almost 9:30. We're waiting a hearing on the House side on migrant facilities at a border. There are 3 members of the so-called squad on that committee. So what will they say as we start to see the impact of these new asylum rules? We got a live report from the southern border on that. Plus, there is this.
The argument is not how much Medicare for all will cost. It will cost a lot. Healthcare costs a lot. The argument is compared to what?
And Bernie Sanders taking aim at his 2020 rivals, pushing his Medicare for All plan. We dig into this with money man Charles Payne in the next hour.
Also an American city that's taking gender neutral to a whole new level, pushing to eliminate words like manhole.
It's a steel cover. It's a steel cover on the ground that's covering a hole that goes through the sewer. They come up with these cockamamie things all the time.
The 1.5-ounce
Go 9:33, as we mentioned, awaiting testimony on the Hill. Acting Homeland Security Secretary at a House hearing on family separations. Border policy starts in about 30 minutes. 3 members of the so-called squad are on that committee. That hearing comes. The Pentagon is now sending more than 2,000 National Guard troops back to the southern border. William Lajeunesse is near the San Ysidro port entry in San Diego, California. I see you, William. Good morning to you. Let's get it going. Hello.
Hey, good morning, Bill. You know, Tijuana is Mexico's 6th largest city. It's also where migrants gather from around the world for their shot at the American dream. So we have some video that we shot yesterday as word spread about this new U.S. policy, which could strand thousands in the city shelters and thousands more inside the immigration pipeline. They had no idea weeks ago that their life would change on Tuesday when President Trump said the U.S. would deny asylum to anyone who passes through another country but fails to apply for and is denied asylum there. Here you have the crowd learning that the U.S. shut the door, refusing to consider a single case from among 9,000 migrants on a waiting list to plead their case to a U.S. official.
Pero esperemos en Dios que pues no nos afecte, ¿verdad?
She's worried they could send them back to her country, I mean her state, and also that she's concerned that affect Mexico.
People call and just say, what's happening? What's going to happen? Are we going to have to go back home? It's not safe for us. It just makes people panic.
The immigration crisis is driven primarily by Central America, but increasingly Africans are flying to Ecuador, then traversing to 7 countries to reach the U.S., Haitians and Cubans as well, followed by Guatemalans, Hondurans and Salvadorans. But this new rule requires those migrants to first apply and be denied asylum in Guatemala or Mexico. It's a very high bar, and most will not.
First of all, there will be people who try to evade. They'll be incentivized to evade. But second, what do you do with those folks? You know, the U.S. doesn't want to take responsibility. Mexico doesn't really want to take responsibility. And it's clear that there's a mass exodus from Central America.
Critics say the rule is cruel, inconsistent with U.S. law, and contrary to congressional intent and dangerous for those forced to stay in Mexico. Supporters argue it is a game changer, a deterrent. It means an end to the frivolous claims who say they are fleeing persecution when in fact they want a better opportunity and a higher standard of living.
If you were coming here and you were coming here to claim asylum and you were going to claim something that wasn't true because you really want to come here for a better life, well then I have sympathy, but you were already knowing you were going to scam the system. So the scam is ending.
So there are 2 hurdles. Number 1, the ACLU has filed suit. They can stop this in the track, and also Guatemala and Mexico haven't agreed to it, but Secretary Pompeo hopes to work that out this week.
All right, thank you. William, nice to have you back there. San Diego today. Thank you, sir. Heather.
Well, nearly 24 members of the MS-13 gang now charged in a string of California murders over the last 2 years. Prosecutors calling the brutality of the killings medieval. Well, let's bring in former Assistant Director of the FBI, Chris Swecker, who headed up the agency's first MS-13 task force. Thank you for joining us. Nice to see you again.
Hi, Heather.
So, in reference to this latest crime, not only were there 22 members of MS-13 involved, 19 of them had entered the country illegally in the last 3 or 4 years. Does any of this surprise you?
Not a bit. When we first established a national MS-13 task force, we knew that many of their members were moving across the border at will and were illegal. That's part of their crime model. You know, they are a transnational criminal enterprise in that sense, but they're probably on the lowest rung of the criminal enterprise ladder in terms of evolution because they center their crime model strictly around violence for turf and reputation. That's it.
Yeah.
They're not out there making profits.
Speaking of turf, why do they seem to target their own communities?
Yeah, that's insidious because it's easy. They employ extortion schemes against small businesses in their own communities. They extort individuals as well. They're into human trafficking in a big way. That's about it. I mean, they center their crime model around preying on their own communities.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to a completely different topic because this is happening today. Coming up just a couple hours from now, 11 a.m. Eastern, federal judge is going to release these documents in the Trump hush money probe. What do you expect to see?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we're going to see some churn of investigation, and we're going to find out that Michael Cohen, in the end, was not a credible witness, and there was an intent problem. The intent being a willfulness in making a payment that to facilitate a campaign. We see the Senator Edwards precedent where a jury refused to convict under those same conditions. So you have to draw a connection between the payment and the campaign itself. If the payment would have been made anyway, then it's not a campaign violation. And we see that there were $17 million in settlements paid by Congress to cover up for various members across 300 cases. So what about those cases?
Yeah. Do you think that this is the end, though, for at least President Trump and the Trump Organization side of it?
I think so, because even the Southern District of New York has to go through Main Justice for an indictment like this, and they would have to get that past the public integrity section under Bill Barr, and I just don't think it's going to meet their standard for a jury conviction. So there may be smoke here, and I'm not trying to defend the conduct, but it's not all that uncommon in making payments to preserve your reputation.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Chris. We appreciate your insight, and we'll see what comes out of the 11 a.m. When they release those documents. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
20 minutes before the hour now. A lot of storms here hitting the east, forcing long delays at baseball games. Here's a fan of the Phillies-Dodgers game. Taking advantage. Check it out. Use the tarp as a... Yeah, you go, guy. As a slip and slide. Yeah, he was arrested. Oh, my gosh. How long was the delay? The game ended at 2 a.m.
Wow.
How many were there?
Yeah.
Not many.
I don't know why they keep doing things like that, because they're always arrested.
Yeah, I think it's got something to do with the beer on the second level. 2-0 Dodgers win that game. You look at that and think, if only we had that size of a slip and slide.
Yeah, that would be fun.
At the age of 8.
Yeah.
So that from Philly.
Well, coming up, President Trump calling the U.S. economy the envy of the world, touting his success ahead of 2020. Will that be his ace in the hole? Former SBA Administrator Linda McMahon weighs in on that.
Looking forward to talking to her. Also a challenger emerging, a Republican businesswoman throwing her hat in the ring, trying to take down Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez in her home district. Her name is Sherry Murray. She will join us in the 10:30 hour to lay out her strategy for how she plans to win. Stay tuned.
She put out policy like the job-killing Green New Deal. She then went on to kill the Amazon deal. AOC has neglected in her limelight bid to focus on in the congressional district.
Fun fact, 1 in 4 of us millennials have debt we might die with. And most of that debt is actually from credit cards. It's just not right. But with SoFi, you can get your credit cards right by consolidating your credit card debt into one monthly payment. You can get your interest rate right by locking in a fixed low rate today. And you can get your money right with SoFi. Check your rate in 2 minutes or less.
33 people are dead, several more injured, following what's being called the deadliest fire in Japan in 18 years. The fire breaking out at a popular animation studio in Kyoto. Police say that a man burst into the studio early this morning. He shouted, "You die," before spreading some sort of liquid that set off the flames. That suspect, by the way, is among the injured being treated at a hospital.
Our economic policy can be summed up in 3 very beautiful and simple words: jobs, jobs, jobs. We've created 6 million new jobs since Election Day. If I would have said that, nobody would have believed it.
It was a big topic last night, talking about the economy. I want to bring in Linda McMahon now, former SBA administrator, chair of the America First PAC. How you doing? Nice to see you again, Linda, and welcome back to our program.
Thanks, Bill. It's good to be here this morning.
You come back anytime, because, the economy issue is going to be with us for the next 15 months as we go forward in this campaign. How do you think you made the case last night? You heard the one line, 3 words: jobs, jobs, jobs. Go ahead.
Well, actually, jobs and small businesses are the backbone of this economy. And when I was administrator for SBA and clearly going all around the country and meeting with small businesses who were creating these jobs, they were thanking the president for tax cuts, for regulatory rollbacks, because it works. I mean, the evidence is plain.